what a miserable day that we've got here. It's been raining on and off. The dog and I got wet this morning, but it was still a nice walk because it was quite cool. But we have nothing at all to complain about compared with the people who were suffering from Sally in the northern Gulf and the coastline there. So please keep all those people in your prayers as this horribly slow hurricane makes its way across. I just hope the levees hold and all the work they've done since Katrina proves its worth and that people do okay in this horrible, yet another for them, horrible hurricane. And of course, we hold in our prayers all the people on the West Coast and the states that are basically on fire. Those who've lost their homes, those who've lost everything. Family, friends, pets, all their possessions. I just cannot imagine that kind of loss. And then there are those who are living under the shadow of, well, it's like a red sky. I don't know whether the photos and the video that's been taken has been enhanced in any way to make it look worse. But the truth is that they're undergoing conditions and breathing in air, which is the worst quality in the world, which in itself is dangerous. So please do uphold all those people in your prayers. So what's going on in the parish? Well, we had our first 8 o'clock in almost exactly 6 months. It's incredible. I think it was March the something. Good morning, Karen. It's good to see you. And we had, I think it was 10 people turn up. So not bad for a start. The surprise was that, excuse me, after the service that we were waiting for the 10 o'clockers. We had two people who were 8 o'clockers come again because they were doing the readings and we hadn't sorted out the lecturer list properly. That's been sorted now, I believe. But there were very few who turned up. And I know a lot of people had asked, and I said, well, yes, feel free to come for the ones who asked. But anyway, there were one or two people I asked in the drive-through after who said they would be coming. Please expect a call of some sort to see if you would like to come. And if you would like to come and you're online this morning, just say, may I come? And I will say yes. So Jan, if you want to come to the 10 o'clock, please arrive by 9:40 so we can have a bit of a run through and explain what goes on. Perhaps the most disappointing part of it was the drive-through communion afterwards. Father Lewis and I stayed there from 11 o'clock till noon, and we had 10 people, and they all turned up in the first 30 minutes. Now, I know the weather was a bit iffy, but, you know, you're in a car, we're outside. And the worst part of it was just the humidity. It was just awful. So, yeah, we were nice and wet, even though we didn't get a drop of rain on us. But please do avail yourselves of all the opportunities we're giving you to have to turn up. And as Karen says, some people will have too many medical issues, and it is right that people with those preconditions do not come to anything that we're offering. Although I'm sure if you're able to be a passenger in a vehicle with a mask on, and we've got masks on and gloves on, you're pretty much safe. But if it's up to you in those circumstances, we are not forcing the issue, and indeed we would prefer people like Karen not to come to the services, just for safety's sake. So let's see who else is on. So good morning, Mike and Jennifer. Good morning, Vern. Good morning, Jan, and good morning, Kit. I don't know what I said. Good morning, Kit. It's good to have you all on. And there are 10 people apparently on both things. And I'm a bit croaky for some reason. Don't know why. It's not as if I don't use my voice much, is it? Anyway, so what are we doing within the services? Well, it was really strange because it just felt like home again on Sunday morning, apart from the cordoned off pews and the camera that was not in use, but it was still there. And apart from me going out to distribute communion and people wearing masks, apart from all those things, it felt good. Well, it didn't feel good to be up at 5 in the morning. Even the dog was disgruntled. I got up and all I could hear was this, and that was the dog saying, "What are you doing? This is wrong. This is a crime against nature." But, he was okay once he got outside, and I was just sort of staggering around with him. Good morning, Pam. But seeing the people who did turn up and taking part in a Right One service, like say for the first time in 6 months, was really good. And it was nice to have that feeling of almost normalcy. And then the 10 o'clock afterwards, I was a bit more wide awake than I have been for a few months. So that was good as well. Good morning, Father Bill. And so, yes, so if you're going to come for the first time, please note where this is going to sound like one of those announcements on an aircraft before you take off, how to fasten your seatbelt, how the oxygen comes down, and where the nearest exit is. As you come into the church doors, not through the narthex to the doors, there is a hand sanitizer. If you're on the right-hand door, it's on your left-hand side. If you're going through the left-hand door, it's on your right-hand side. Now, I'm hoping that everything looks correct in terms of, because I see a mirror image of myself, so everything's wrong, but you know what I mean. So they're there. There's another one as you walk in on the right-hand side, because that's where the booklets are. There are 2 booklets for you to collect. One is the service itself. One is the readings and the hymns. For those of you who are 8 o'clockers, there's readings, the service booklet and the readings. And for the 10 o'clock, there's the service booklet and the readings and hymns. They're in a separate thing. So that's your first protocol. Sanitizer, pick something up. You're wearing a mask, of course, and then go and find a place to sit. If you are living together and under close quarters, then you can sit together. You don't have to socially distance between yourselves, but you do have to do from other people. And then if you will run through the hymns, I'll explain about the communion, and then we go through the service. It starts at 5 to 10. Josh begins his prelude, so that Jay can get the recording going, and then by the time people have found us either on YouTube or Facebook, we can it'll be 10 o'clock, so we can get the service going properly. That's the idea behind that. So it starts at 5 but it gives people other 5 minutes to sort of log in and find us, because I know sometimes it's a bit weird. Even after I've done the recording, it seems to be odd that it takes me a while to find the recording of it, never mind when it's running live. So Jennifer had to be quarantined after taking a COVID-19 test, so we could not. Oh, wow. Oh, the test was negative. That's good. That is really, really good. Yes, please keep us up to date. How are you both doing? Yes, good to hear that there was a negative test. That's good. And good morning, Anne. And good morning, Holly. So, having said that, so please wait for a call. As I said, you're not being dragooned into attending. You don't need to give me a reason why you don't want to attend. That is your choice. So it's just let your yes be yes and your no be no without qualification. Now, we still have to be careful about numbers here. So please don't just turn up on spec if you've not been asked, because, refusal of service can be quite embarrassing. And please respect the fact that, yes, masks are required throughout the service. You can wash your hands, and social distancing is required throughout the service. That includes coming in, being in the church at any time after the service, and then no congregating in the back of the church or in the parking lot afterwards. Right, let's see, what are the COVID numbers for today? Well, according to the CDC this morning, and this is from yesterday, I think it was 12:18 p.m., 6,262,216 positive cases, and there were 188,513 deaths. In Florida itself, there were 648,269 positive cases with 11,871 deaths. And again, those are the up-to-date numbers. Now, I'm sorry to have to say these are from the CDC. From what I've heard from the news over the last few days, well, last couple of months really, there seems to be some political shenanigans going on to try and kind of massage those figures, which is really sad if that's true. So those figures are as they stand from that source, but I don't know of any other source. So there we go. It seems that a few things are happening in Florida. Some of the bars are opening now, and I just hope it works better than the 2 attempts that the UK has had in opening bars. You know, they've done the same thing. They put stickers all over the floor to represent where 6 feet is. But pubs being what they are in England, and the drinkers being who they are in England, just entering a pub at any sense of restrictions and COVID-19 just goes out of the window. Give me a pint, let me lean on the bar, let me chat to my friends in the closest possible way possible, and let me drink more and more and more until I'm almost oblivious and stagger my way out, touching everybody on the way. Now, that is, of course, a bit of a lampooning, but there's more truth to it than you may well imagine. Britain is an island of boozers, to say the least. I mean, not all people, obviously, but you wouldn't want to go out on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night to a pub in the town centre. Let me tell you that. It's a bit bad. And I say this as someone who used to play in pubs and clubs every weekend for a number of years, clubs being anything size from 100 people to 600 or 700 people. And I was one of the sober ones because I was playing guitar, driving and singing. Not in that order, though. It was a study in real life within that world of booziness. And things have only gotten worse than when I did this. It's like, what? Gosh, I think the last gig I played would have been 1993 with the band. Actually, yeah, kind of. With the band as in a kind of non-clergy person, if that makes sense. I've played with the band a couple of times since then, but I was ordained. So yeah, good luck to all those people who deservedly need to make a living by running their businesses. I just hope that people really, really do behave themselves and act in a way which is consistent with where we are at this stage of the coronavirus pandemic, which is sensibly wearing a mask, maintaining social distancing all the time. I mean, one would hope that you wouldn't need to do a public information film, whatever they call them over here. But it seems that not everybody's got the memo, which is amazing and silly. So let's move on to our COVID story. Let's make real those 188,513 deaths, and let them not be in vain either. So as we pray for the families, for those who've died, for those on the front line who still put themselves out there and risk themselves every single day for our benefit, let's hear a story of one of those people. Alternative source for COVID numbers. Thank you. I will click the link later, Kit. Thank you. This is a story by Kit Ramgopal. It's about a lady called Des Anne Remain. She was 36. She was a high school principal in New York City. Here's the text. To the students and teachers at Brooklyn Democracy Academy, what an interesting name, Principal Des Anne Remain was leader, mother, hairdresser, basketball partner, educator, and inspiration. Quote, Ms. Remain, she is the brightest thing in everyone's life, said a former student, Judith Atongi. Des Anne, 36, was the first New York City public school official to die from the coronavirus. She had an infectious smile and a Michelle Obama aura, students and colleagues say. She's incredible, said another former student, Bree Sledge. She's a life changer. She's a mother, even though she didn't have kids. We were her children. That's one thing I value about her, how important she made us feel. Des Anne, who emigrated from Trinidad to an inner school city in Queens, had an unshakable motivation to inspire the typically under-resourced students at the school. Quote, she wanted to give them an opportunity to excel, dream without limitations, and to ultimately achieve the American dream, said Mohammed Q. Amin, Des Anne's friend, because she achieved the American dream. It's really sad when we lose somebody who's such an inspiration and somebody who puts themselves out there within the confines of an environment that they've willingly joined so as to raise people up from where they are and inspire them to see themselves as being worth something. So God bless Des Anne for the work she did, and we pray for her family and friends and those who miss her. Now, Kate has told me, she sent me a text, that she'd been reading about COVID survivors who had other afflictions as a result of contracting COVID-19. And there's a lady called Diana Berendt, whose mild to moderate case resulted in post-COVID onset glaucoma. And she's organized a patient advocacy group especially geared to COVID survivors. Now, this is called Survivors Corps. The group has grown to be more than 100,000 members just in the last few months. Its website is easy. It's survivorscorps.com. That's C-O-R-P-S, survivorcorps, C-O-R-P-S.com. And it has a COVID frequently asked questions, does webinars, quite a few for long-haul survivors who are seeing other symptoms, and ways to get involved in things like plasma donation and other things. They also have a fitter Facebook group and a Twitter account where survivors share their experiences. Now, it should be of interest to us all, but it might be of a special interest to those of us who are or know of those who are COVID-19 survivors. Yes, it seems to be that there are strange things afoot with people when they have suffered from COVID. And I don't think it really matters what level of disease you get. Even for those who have it mildly, there seems to be a certain grouping of strange side effects or other ailments that pop up because of the COVID-19. It's kind of like, the adverts they do on drugs, and then they have the fine print, which tells you whatever, and there'll be somebody speaking a lot faster, or at least it's been sped up, telling you what the side effects for that drug can be. One of the first being, if you're allergic to this drug that we've just invented, you shouldn't use it. Well, how are you going to know? Because you've just invented it. Nobody has ever seen this drug before, and you're saying one of the side effects could possibly the use of this drug. Go figure. But the whole point here being that if you contract COVID-19, become more aware of any other possible things that may be happening to you because of COVID-19, and don't just write them off as you being paranoid or neurotic or suddenly becoming overly concerned with your health, because it may well be that COVID-19 has triggered something else. And you really don't want to let those things linger, especially if there's a possibility that they may become worse and become more problematic than your experience of COVID-19. So please do take care of yourselves. So, what is it? Well, 20 minutes, gosh, to go through that. But anyway, so what is the discussion for today? Well, it's kind of interesting because I've been looking at what my texts and emails say, and thank you for putting these things in front of me. Some of you are rather cheeky and naughty and do things in a kind of left-handed way to get me to talk about things which could upset some people. Maybe this is one of them, I don't know. But what I decided I would do is aggregate the comments into themes. And a lot of the themes today, well, not today, are to do with the Sermon on the Mount. Some of the questions have come up about that. And you're kind of looking ahead most of those texts and emails to what we will be covering in, well, we haven't even gotten through chapter 5 yet, but we'll be getting to them in chapter 6 and 7. So we will cover them. And I don't really want to gazump what I'm doing before we get there. So I'm just going to let those things lie. And then others are to do with the kind of religious political angles of what we're going through at the moment with COVID-19 and coming up to an election, which is being touted as the most important election ever, although I would have thought that every election is the most important, and other things. So I thought I would deal with this. Now, the way it was written was talk about the Christian idea or notion of what does the Bible say or what does theology say about lying. Well, we obviously know where that's come from because of what's been in the news. So let me turn that on its head and let me first talk about how we perceive truth. And I want to start off by reading from John's Gospel. And this is where Jesus comes before Pilate. And it starts off, so it's chapter 18, and I'm starting off with verse 33. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" Now, I could reread this several times, and I would change the way I approached what both Pilate and Jesus were saying, just by changing the inflection. From something like when Pilate says, "What have you done? What have you done?" You could just shift it and change the meaning completely. And the same with Jesus. My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. So it's a whole different understanding. So Pilate may well be thinking, well, you're a Jew, so what country are you talking about? And he said, so you are a king? So you are a king. So you're a king? You see the difference? It just shifts the meaning of everything. And when Jesus ends up by saying, "You say that I am a king," or "You say that I am a king, for this I was born. Or, for this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. The focus being on him being the testifier rather than his kingship. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. So he's making a claim there, Jesus, that somehow he himself in his own person and truth are intimately related. And we have this idea of listening, of the word. Remember, this is John's gospel. In the beginning was the word. The creative order was created by the outpouring of the word, by God speaking things into existence. And then Pilate asks him, what is truth? What is truth? What's truth? I mean, again, there's so many different ways of putting it. And every one of them has a way into understanding what's going on here. Of course, we know what happened in the end. Pilate washed his hands of the whole thing. So, what is truth? Is truth popular opinion? Good morning, Paula. See if we can do it. Hey, I managed to do it without sticking my tongue out. Jesus says truth. Jesus claims to be the way, the truth, and the life. But what does he mean by that? Well, we can look at what the people who disagreed with him thought of that. And that was they disagreed vehemently and thought that he was an imposter, that he certainly couldn't be who they were expecting as the Messiah, the one who was to come, because they had this heaped up notion of what that involved, including the army. You know, that Jesus or the Messiah would head this routing army who would get rid of the enemy, whoever it would happen to be, in this case, the Roman Empire, and they would set up their kingdom again as Israel. The temple would be restored to fully functioning glory, etc., 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 and God would bless them once more. But Jesus was just an absolute thorn in their flesh. He kept picking them up for the things that they claimed to believe in. They kept changing their notions of what it was to believe in the God in whom they believe, and he was supposed to be one of them. So they wanted to get rid of him. So Jesus, on the one hand, says he is the truth and he speaks the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. The enemies say no, they have the truth. And the truth is, this guy's an imposter. This guy isn't who he claims to be. And then Pilate, as the kind of foreign onlooker, the foreign arbitrator, comes in. And how do we define Pilate's notions here? Well, we are told that Pilate's wife said, be careful, this guy is not who you think he is, because she had a dream. So Pilate approaches this with some trepidation, but it could be a kind of, another day at the office, I can't wait to get home to my Netflix binge series and my meatloaf. And it's like a meh. Yeah, what's another death? Who cares? And this kind of echoes Nicodemus, a kind of utilitarianism, that the greatest good for the greatest number of the people. So one death versus the rest of us, it may be the best thing to do. Get rid of him. And so he's kind of meh. Or it could have been some kind of existential crisis that when he asked what is truth, he really was seeking for something at that point. And he was battling within himself with what his wife had warned him about. This man who seemed to portray no threat at all. And the baying hounds who was saying, if you don't do what we ask, then there's going to be more trouble because we know people, including Pilate's boss. So there's that kind of existential crisis. What do I do in this situation? Nothing seems to be right. And in the end, he washes his hands as if his lack of decision makes it okay that this person can die and he's not responsible in any way. that the crowd can get and do what they want, and he's not responsible in any way. It again, it's a strange but natural way of looking at things. Maybe he was just a racist. Yeah, what's truth? You've got your stuff going on. I wish you would do more about. Yes, thank you, Caiaphas. Yeah, I was thinking of a letter N for some reason, but yeah, Caiaphas. Thank you. Thanks for picking up on that, Father Bill. It was not Nicodemus. Nicodemus came at night. It was Caiaphas who was the one who said, "Hey, one should die for the good of the rest of us." It's almost Star Trek, isn't it? The many for the one for the many, or whatever. Paula will no doubtably correct me on that too. So maybe it's just racism. He was a Roman emperor, didn't like the people where he was, didn't care. So it's like, hey, what's the point here? Do I care if justice is served? I don't know. What's the point of that? And again, historically, there's been a gazillion examples of that. The British Empire, under which the sun never set, was really, really good at measuring justice not by its own stick of British justice, but in terms of expediency, what it could get away with. Maybe it was religionist, but that Pilate here had his own specific set of beliefs, none of which aligned with Judaism, and so this little Mediterranean group having an infighting session and being very noisy about it was something that needed to be put down. And if it was, if it meant getting the Roman guard out to try and quell a big crowd, which would have caught the attention of his superiors, versus just get rid of this guy. But I don't want to be involved in this. I'm just going to step outside and you do what you do according to your custom. Then it could have been religionist. Paula, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. Spock, The Wrath of Khan, one of the best Star Trek movies, if not the best. It does look a bit kind of hammy nowadays, but I think it's still, its moral structure is pretty good. Good versus evil and all that lot. And yes, so it ended up with hand washing and a death for the reasons of popularity, whatever else you want to say about it. So how do we fit that into what we believe? Well, in the 21st century, we have these phrases now which sound really, really weird. We talk about, well, there's my truth, and I'm living my truth, and there's your truth, and you live your truth. Again, this is truth as a personal perspective, and it can be used and misused in so many different ways. Because what are we talking about in terms of truth? How are we defining the word true there? Well, a lot of it is to do with listen to what I say rather than what I do, and then a careful use of words. So, for example, a gazillion years ago with Bill Clinton, when he famously or infamously said, "I did not have sex with that woman." So you want to split hairs, you start redefining what sex actually is, which is what he was doing. Technically, he's right. Morally and ethically, it's about as far wrong as you can possibly be. Sadly, though, we live in a world where a lot of people who want to maintain their virginity still will entertain and take part in acts which, although technically is not having sex, actually morally and ethically is. And a lot of those people are also those who, what's it called, the promise keepers or something like that, where they promise to remain, virgins until they find the man or the woman whom God is going to send them. There's so many things wrong with the theology of that, but so they will take part in these sexual activities, and yet will claim that they have not had sex. So it's not an isolated account. But it is this kind of my truth versus your truth. Um, and you could be pedantic and say, well, this is a war of words, and how somebody comes to believe a set of words meaning one thing rather than another thing. So is it etymology? Well, no, this is how people live their lives. And we can see this in how it's to do a lot of it again is to do with how we see ourselves, the kind of core of who we are, our being. And we try and compartmentalize things because we know that this doesn't really fit with this. And we have that the sense of disjointedness within ourselves, which can come too often. And there are these things we like, and so we will sort of play those up in how we believe and live and speak. And there are these things we don't like, so we reduce the importance of them. So these things are truer, or the only true things, and these things are false and not true. And I have what I think is a really good example. What seems to be a million years ago now, back in England, there was a long-running television advert for the Guardian newspaper. Now, the Guardian has always seen itself to be on the liberal side of things, and I'm talking about English liberalism, not how it's understood in the US, kicking against both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. It really was a party for the people in a way that the Labour Party thought it was, but had gone off the rails. But that's another thought. And it was a paper that my grandfather bought every day of his life. Well, maybe of his life, because I would think my great-grandfather had it when it was the Manchester Guardian. So this TV advert comes on, and it's kind of in a very tight frame. And you see this city gentleman dressed as they used to be, in a really nice black suit with highly polished shoes, an umbrella in one hand, a briefcase in another, and a bowler hat. He was a city gent, and he was making his way down the street. And then the image pulled out, so it became wider. So you saw on the left-hand side of the frame the city gent, and then all of a sudden you saw this young man running like heck towards him. And this guy was a skinhead. By skinhead, this is a person within British culture who has really short cropped hair, wore a certain style of clothes, believed a certain style kind of things, listened to a certain kind of music. Some were known for being quite violent. It wasn't necessarily a violent thing, but skinheads were often seen as trouble. And so when this guy's running down, you can see this is a skinhead. You immediately think, if you're British, ooh, this can't end well. And he runs up to this city gentleman who's minding his own business with his umbrella and his briefcase and his bowler hat, and he goes, boom, just shoves him. So this guy just flies out of the frame, and the skinhead continues to run on. And you immediately think, wow, such violence to somebody he's never met. And it confirms you in your belief that the city gentleman, this upper class man, was doing nothing harmful or anything. He was just being, doing his own thing. And yet this thug, the skinhead, for no good reason, comes and just knocks this guy flying. And it's just unprovoked. It was just nasty. And he should be arrested and thrown in jail for a long, long time. But then it stops. And the camera pulls out further. And you see the whole scene again, but from a further distance. And you see the city gentleman going, mind his own business. And then you see this skinhead coming, running crazily, and then pushes the city gentleman out of the way, forcefully and brutally out of the way, and carries on because of his own momentum. And then you see this huge thing crash to the ground that was above them, and just smashes to smithereens as it hits the ground. And all of a sudden, your whole perspective's changed on what happened. That this skinhead is no longer a thug, but is a hero because he's just saved this city gent's life. Because if the city gent hadn't been pushed out of the way, then he would have been killed by this thing landing on his head. And then there's some kind of tagline for the Guardian saying, "See the fuller perspective," or something like that. And I think this is a really good lesson for us all, that we instantly make judgments. It's who we are. It's one of the ways we try and survive in this dog eat dog world. That we say, "Oh, this person is not a threat. This person could be. This group is this. This group is this." And so when we look at the protests, depending on your view, you will either see people protesting for a just cause, and those who are causing the rioters as a group of thugs who are capitalizing on the peaceful protesters, or you will see something like, and I'm drawing really black and white distinctions here. There are shades of grey, or you'll see that the Black Lives Movement is a load of hooey and shouldn't be happening. And one can understand the riots because basically they are going to riot, whatever they is. And it's all a front for Antifa. So you get, protesters versus riots, Black Lives Movement versus Antifa. And you also get this awakening of what you can only call white supremacy. I've come across these people in the UK. They are hilarious in their stupidity. Because it isn't just a kind of neo-Nazi notion of superiority. It is a real fear that they are going to outnumber us and we will disappear. There's so many weird and wacky and wonderful, in a weird, silly way, notions that come up. But at the base level of it is just pure racism. And it's kind of really interesting in an academic way to think about these things. That people have these groupings. This is what I raised as true. This is what I lower as false. And this little encapsulated thing can't be expanded to include other things. So you will get those people where the protests are not legitimate and it was just all riots. And you will get the other ones on the other side, the opposite, say, well, any rioting was justified, which is not true. So you get, again, it's black and white, black and white. And underlying all this is a whole heap of notions of white supremacy, which, again, if it weren't dangerous, would be laughable. So that's my truth and how that needs expanding to include a wider perspective of things versus your truth, which also needs expanding to include a wider perspective. And it's real heart-to-heart discussion, which is the thing that can break down these things. Unfortunately, we now live in a time where everything's kind of partisan, and a lot of that is we should hold at the feet of 24-hour news, because it's just a cycle of nonsense quite often. And social media, but I'll be talking about that in a short while. Well, I know I'll talk about it now because a lot of truth that we carry is of personal value. It's about us and at the core of our being and what we think is important about who we are and what we are. So when it comes to things like Facebook and Twitter and all the other things I've never heard of, because I'm old, truth turns transactional in nature. There's no debate required, because what you do is you find people with whom you agree, and it's a bit like that show on TV where they ask 100 people what's the first word that comes into their mind when they hear this, and they go ding ding as the contestants try and discover the thoughts of these 100 people. So truth becomes a matter of popularity. And if you've got 1 million people with a point of view in which you agree, then you must be right, because they hold my personal values. And so you just side with that. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, everything. Because it's anonymous. Two, the values are so vague in nature There's no nuance involved, and nuance is the death of nuance is the death of debate, and there's no accountability. There's no fact finding. There's no being questioned about the rationale behind these things. There's no checking to see if the things hold any weight and veracity, which leads us quite nicely into scientific truth. Now, scientific truth shouldn't really be a truth all of its own. I mean, it has its own method, of course. It's open to falsification. Or is it false? Yeah, it is falsification, falsifying. Yeah. Somebody does a test and says, when I did these things, this was the result. And somebody strokes their beard and goes, let me check. And they do exactly the same things. And if they don't get the same result, then they'll get together and say, well, did you do such and such? Well, no, I didn't. Let me go back. And then the whole idea is that if you can falsify, if you can prove that to be wrong, then it fails as a test. Thing starts off as a hypothesis. I will make cold fusion reactions happen at room temperature. That became a big thing in the noughties, was it? Or was it the 90s? Somebody claimed to have done cold fusion at room temperature. And then a lot of people tried it and says, no, nothing happened. What you saw was the bubbles in the soda that you used. Or something, it was a bit more complicated than that. But it was proven to be wrong. So scientific truth is always expanding and is always open to change. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't a certain sense of people holding on to truths which are suddenly outdated. I think it was Karl Popper who talked about scientific paradigms. People just don't sort of hold on to something and then things gradually evolve into another sense of truth about that subject, whatever that subject may be. It seems like people will hold on and hold on and hold on until there's such an overwhelming amount of evidence that the thing just changes and flips overnight almost. And that's called the scientific paradigm. So we had like Sir Isaac Newton, and then we have Einstein. And it took a bit of a time before things shifted. And even now, there are certain elements of Einstein's theory that are still held as they could be true, but we don't know because we haven't got the evidence yet. There's also the notion within medicine with these things about how illness develops. We had the miasmic theory where it was believed that germs were in clouds that just went around and attacking people. It took quite a while to get rid of that. There is some truth in that. One of the things we talk about with COVID-19 is the virus we can expel with every breath. So they weren't that far away. They just didn't understand the mechanisms which underlay this and germ theory itself. But in the 20th and the 21st century, there's been a shift. And I don't think this is totally to do with social media. And the shift has been from the expert, somebody who's actually spent the time learning, done years and years and years in their particular field, versus the non-expert. And we also now have the expert versus the charlatan. And it has to be said that there's been a rise in the Western world, although it seems to have been kind of almost built into the American experiment of an anti-science and anti-intellectualism. And that's come through religion within the US and through the post-historic movement who've kind of those people who see science as kind of failed in bringing about the nirvana that everyone expected, that it's created more problems. So experts on the one hand in religion are just dissed because they don't promote religious views that these fundamentalists believe in. In fact, they promote things that many fundamentalists would say are antithetical to their religion. And on the other hand, science has caused so many problems, from global warming to pollution to you know what they call them, frankenfoods, the genetically modified um, stuff, and they kind of they've moved away from it, and they've moved to some kind of pseudo spiritual realm of the universe. So when an expert says something, and I've actually heard this from a New Testament professor, that in when he was doing, it was like Christian Doctrine 101, his first class of a new year of freshmen, um, and this guy's got 30 odd years, or it's be more than that now. He's still alive, so it'd be 50 odd years in expertise in one small area of theology. Um, and he was talking about as an introduction to this. And then one of the students just sort of said, "No, you're wrong." And then proceeded to spout in a completely ignorant way and was equating, as Paula says, his ignorance versus this guy's knowledge. And Paula's quoting from Isaac Asimov. "My ignorance is as good as your knowledge." And that's where we are in society. Um, the thing is, listening to non-experts can cost lives. We have the anti-vaxxers, started by a British doctor of all things, who queried this, did a bunch of studies in air quotes, which proved that there was a link between autism and the vaccinations. And association is never causation. I mean, that's one of the first things you learn in science, and it's also part of theology. Um, and so we have now a rise in some of the illnesses, popular illnesses that killed many, many people and children, coming back again, because people now believe something which has been debunked time and time and time again, because my ignorance is as good as your knowledge. Which, and I want to talk about something which may seem kind of bizarre, but it's kind of relevant in a way. I love audio. I love acoustics. When I did my building stuff back in the day, I kind of concentrated on acoustics. So I learned all the math and all the other stuff. But obviously, because I'm a musician, I like listening to music. So try and listen to music at the highest quality. And because I've done studio recordings as well, I know the difference between what the original source was and how often it comes out with in a hi-fi, a high fidelity system. And I'm doing this because I've got two speakers here. For those of you who like to know, they're KEF Q300s or something like that, British speakers. And so the idea being is trying to get what you hear coming out of your speakers as near as possible to the experience of what it sounded like in the studio or in a live concert. That is the goal. And now, what is it, 1985, I think, when the CDs first came out, Perfect Sound Forever, as Philips called it. We now have two camps. We have the analog camp versus the digital camp. The analog camp says vinyl records sound better than CDs. And the CD camp saying, no, it could have been earlier on with pretty cheap converters and our inability to properly digitize signals, that it was pretty ropey. But now, no. CDs are far superior. Plus, we've got all these high rate files that we can use, etc., etc., etc. Yes, they do. I'll explain that in a second. The question being from YouTube, Bill, do your speakers have a British accent? So people say analog sounds more real. It sounds smoother. It sounds more accurate, which actually technically is impossible. And other people will say that CDs are more accurate, which on paper technically is possible. But then there's all the psychoacoustics that go on within that. And then there's your room, there's the whole setup. So just by playing a CD on my system and then going into the living room and playing it on the DVD player, you'll get two different experiences because it's just going to sound absolutely different. So what's going on here? A lot of it is to do with what one prefers to hear, which is quite often something you learn. Most of my listening experience was on headphones. I have several pairs of headphones, but also on small speakers in my bedroom at a very low volume. And so, and that was with vinyl or recorded on cassette tapes. And I still have a cassette tape player and recorder. And that's what people get used to. So when they hear the brighter, fuller, cleaner, lower noise floor sounds of CD, they hear a difference. And some of them think it's a difference they like, and some people think it's a difference they don't like. Coming over to the US, I find that there is a difference in how speakers are voiced. In the same way that you can voice an organ, every church organ is given a certain voice so that the mixture between certain settings of flutes and horns and different kinds of instruments are mixed together to give it its unique voice. And there are countries like there's the French sound, there's the German sound, there's the English cathedral organ sound. Each one of them has a distinct style of voicing what an organ sounds like. And it's the same with speakers. There's a distinct style of speakers. There's one that's an English sound, it's far leaner. The US sound is far bassier. And people who like the US style don't like the English. And the people who like the English style of speaker don't like the US. It's kind of weird, isn't it? So, which leads us, this is going to go on a bit. No, it won't. I'll end in a short while. So, is there a truth in audio? There is technically, but it all comes down to personal preference at the end of it. And nobody gets killed in the doing of that. Unless you plug your fingers into a very, very powerful capacitor, but that's a different story. Which leads us to religious belief as truth. Now, the first thing is all religions cannot be true because they all say something different about the ultimate source we call God. Within Christianity, if we just look at Christianity, all denominations cannot be true because they say so many different things. When I'm using denominations, I'm using it in its loosest sense now to include the kind of American manufactured ones like Seventh-day Adventism, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientism, those kind of things. And so they cannot all be true. Some use the Bible only. Some have added to the Bible. Some have added things like magisterium, the Roman Catholic Church, and say this is just as much true as, and you've got to believe all this as well as what the Bible says. Some will say there's only one version of the Bible that you should use, and that's the only one you believe in. And some say that this particular theology is the one you have to believe in, and if you don't believe in it this way, then you're out of the. You're not a member of the church. You're not a member of the saved. You're going to burn in hell, and they're pretty clear about that. But what about where all these different religions, all these denominations touch each other in agreement? Isn't that some place where we can begin to talk? Well, for some people, yes. And some people get into interfaith discussions based on these areas where they touch. Some people say, well, no, because unless you take on the whole package, then you're not within the ark of salvation, you're lost, and you're going to burn. Now, what does the Bible say about itself? That's the thing. If Jesus says he's the truth, let me see if I can get my thing up here. Jesus says he's the truth, and he talks about the Hebrew scriptures, and he kind of came to fulfill them, as we're doing now, then there's something we need to take as just read, that the Bible itself, as promoted by Jesus, speaks of him. So the truth which the Bible relates isn't a kind of truth in the literal interpretation of the Bible itself, but is of how it points to the Messiah, whom Christians see as being Jesus. So if you want to try and use the Bible in a literal sense, you're going to fall foul, because it's speaking of a person, and that person is Jesus. And so it's what's behind and what was intended behind the stories, behind the parables, behind the teachings, behind the poetry, behind the lessons, behind even examples of history which aren't really history. For example, the creation stories. What is the truth? What is this philosophical grounding of being that it's trying to state that points us to Jesus? And then what's Jesus saying about himself when he claims to be the truth? And it's kind of interesting, because Luke's gospel is probably the best example of the concept of religious truth. The religious truth of Luke's gospel is that Jesus came for all of humanity, especially the poor and the marginalized. And we see this because Luke goes on in the birth narrative, which portrays Jesus as being born in a stable and sleeping in a manger. And the birth narrative also shows us shepherds as the first to hear the good news. Shepherds being like beyond low class in the Jewish society. And God deigned it proper that they should be the first to hear about the Savior coming amongst us. And that just sets the scene for the rest of Luke's gospel. So I've not gotten through everything I wanted to do, but it's now 2 minutes past 11. I'm going to finish with this idea, which I heard many, many years ago, and I've never really gotten my head around it since, because I just think it's so wrong. The opposite of true isn't a lie. It's the opposite of true is false. The opposite of truth is falsehood. And Christians historically have been known, and today have been known, to bend the truth. Within the Roman Church, there's a thing called mental reservation. It was invented in the Middle Ages because there was this whole kind of philosophical interest in what's called casuistry, where you can kind of fine chop truth down into various things. In Britain, I don't know whether it's still used, but it certainly was when I was young. You would call someone a Jesuit, not as a term of endearment, but as somebody who wasn't telling the whole truth. There were fine splitting the truth, and we're only giving you a part of the truth. And this is what the term mental reservation is all about. It's withholding essential facts and information to give you a slanted view of what those people want you to do or to believe. Say I came across this many, many years ago in my readings of, what's he called? I can't remember what it's called now. But he was an Anglican who then became a Roman Catholic, and he actually became a cardinal, and he's actually now a saint. He wrote Apologia pro Vita Sua, and Count Newman, John Henry Newman, from the 1900s. And I remember him talking about, if you wanted to get somebody to become interested and convert them to the Catholic faith, he wouldn't tell them the whole truth, which I think is absolutely appalling. But it is a way of, it's called the lie of necessity. And it's also to do with if you've got a conflict between justice and truth, justice should always win. Um, Justice being in this case with John Henry Newman, to do with getting somebody inside the ark of salvation within the Roman Church. So, which would have led us to what does it mean to lie? Well, lie is to say something or do something which can easily be proven to be false, or at least can be proven to be false, and that you did it in a knowing way. And with that, I'm going to end today. So you can put your own complexion on that part of thing. To do something opposite to what you know is true, or to say something and you say it or do it in a knowing way. So I hope that's helped, giving you an idea of how you need to expand yourself in terms of looking at where truth lies, fact checking, making sure that your sources that you've fact checked with are impeccable, that you just don't agree with things because as my ignorance is as good as your knowledge. We all have blind spots. Some of us have many, many blind spots. We are just reactive rather than open to ideas which may change us and challenge us. And that again is another 21st century problem. So with that, I hope you've gotten something out of this hour and 6 minutes. Please stay safe. I will see you all on Thursday with Father Lewis. And if not, I will hopefully see you on Sunday, either at the services now or at the drive-through. In the meantime, please do stay safe and look after yourselves, and God bless.